My name is Inaya. I am 16 years old, and the night my life turned to ash began with a single sentence. My mother kicked me out of the house at 16. "You'll come crawling back in a month," she spat. My father slammed the front door in my face so hard the frame rattled. I walked away. I never looked back. But 11 years later, my phone lit up, 99 missed calls. They were begging me to answer. Back then, I was just a girl with charcoal-stained fingers and a foolish kind of hope in my chest. I had just been accepted into a prestigious fine arts college across the city, the kind of place people like me only saw in glossy brochures or on Instagram feeds of the wealthy. I came home clutching that acceptance letter like it was a life jacket, thinking my parents would finally see me. Instead, my mother, Malika, read the words "Fine Arts Program" and laughed without a hint of joy. "You think smearing colors on a canvas is a future? You think that's what we worked for?" "Absolutely not," she said. She shredded the envelope right in front of me. Small white flakes rained down on the hardwood floor while my stomach turned to ice. My father, Jabari, didn't even sit down. He walked over, pointing a finger at the portfolio I had spent years building. "Either you enroll in the pre-med track at the state university like we planned, or you figure it out on your own. No house, no money, no family. Choose." My cheeks burned. My hands were shaking so violently I had to ball them into fists so they wouldn't see. "Then I guess I'm figuring it out on my own," I heard myself say, even though every survival instinct was screaming at me to back down. His eyes turned cold. "Fine. Pack your trash. You'll be back begging in a month." He threw the front door open with such force it hit the wall, and then he slammed it behind me as I stepped out with nothing but an old backpack and a sketchbook pressed against my chest. I walked down that dark Brooklyn street, feeling my childhood snap behind me like a severed cable. I swore I would rather starve than ever crawl back. I didn't know then that one day the begging would come from them. Before I tell you what they said and what happened after I left, tell me what time it is for you right now and where you're reading this from. I'm curious to see how far this story travels. I'm Inaya, 16 years old, standing on a cracked sidewalk with a backpack and a dream they tried to kill. That night, I slept on a friend's couch, but my mind wasn't on the borrowed blankets. It was inside a painting I hadn't created yet. In my head, I saw a girl reaching for a door while two faceless figures loomed behind her, their hands stained with the ash of burned canvases. That image wouldn't leave me alone. When I finally stepped onto campus a week later, sleep-deprived, terrified, and technically homeless, I felt something strange. Not safety, but possibility. The studio smelled like acrylics and turpentine, and for the first time in my life, no one told me that art was a waste of time. I scraped together my savings, paid the first month's rent on a tiny shared room near the school, and took graveyard shifts at a greasy diner. During the day, I painted until my fingers cramped. At night, I bussed tables and pretended my feet weren't killing me. The exhaustion was brutal, but it still felt better than suffocating in that house. The first real human warmth I felt came from a classmate, a guy named Sakani with wild curls and paint permanently under his fingernails. He looked at my first piece, a raw charcoal sketch of those faceless parents, and whistled softly. "There's rage in this," he said. "Real rage. Don't lose that." I didn't realize it then, but that comment would become the seed of something darker. Revenge art. That week, I woke up from a nightmare soaked in sweat. In the dream, my mother had taken every canvas I'd ever painted and tossed them one by one into a fireplace, smiling as the colors curled and blackened. I jumped up, grabbed my sketchbook, and started drawing the scene exactly as I'd seen it, my hands reaching into the flames, her face distorted with satisfaction. The next day, I turned that sketch into a painting. Every brushstroke felt like a scream I'd never been allowed to let out. That piece, half confession, half accusation, caught people's attention. Professors stopped in front of it. Students whispered, "This is raw." One of them asked, "Who hurt you?" I just smiled weakly and kept painting. I wasn't ready to answer that out loud yet. Money remained a constant ghost. My parents had cut me off completely. No calls, no texts, nothing but a silent block. When it came time to pay the tuition for the next semester, I showed up at the financial aid office, trembling, only to find out my scholarship application had been mysteriously withdrawn from the student portal. I hadn't withdrawn anything. I later found out from a sympathetic clerk that someone had called posing as me, saying I had decided not to pursue art after all. There were only 2 people who would benefit from that. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. If they thought sabotaging my future from a distance would make me come crawling back, they didn't know me at all. I took on more shifts. I sold sketches on the street. I painted until my vision blurred. At 3 a.m, when the loneliness set in, a question would circle my mind like a vulture. Would you dare to walk away from everything you've ever known, even knowing that the silence might swallow you whole? By the time the mid-year student exhibition came around, I had turned my anger into a series. 3 large canvases. A child offering a glowing painting to 2 shadow-heavy adults. The adults tearing it in half. The child walking away, clutching the broken pieces like armor. My mentor encouraged me to submit them as a set. "People need to see this story," she said. "It's ugly and it's honest. That's what good art is." On opening night, the gallery was buzzing with chatter, cheap wine, and the click of expensive shoes on polished concrete. I stood by my series with damp palms, pretending I wasn't watching every reaction. Some people looked in silence. Others leaned in to read the small title card, Legacy. A guy I'd seen around nodded toward me. "Who are they?" he asked, pointing at the shadow figures. "My parents," I said simply. He laughed awkwardly, thinking I was joking. I didn't correct him. As the room filled up, my phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number. I ignored it. Then again and again, I silenced it, forcing myself to focus. That's when I felt it, the shift in the air, the kind of stillness that isn't silence, but tension tightening like a wire. I looked toward the entrance and nearly stopped breathing. My mother was standing in the doorway, dressed like she was attending a corporate gala, scanning the room with that familiar mix of judgment and calculation. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating, but then her gaze locked onto my series. Her face hardened. She moved toward my work with slow, deliberate steps. The crowd parted in her wake like they could feel the storm. "What is this?" she hissed when she reached my corner. Her voice was low, but dripping with venom. "This is how you portray us? Like monsters?" The heat rushed to my face, but I didn't look away. "If the shoe fits, wear it." Her eyes flashed. She reached toward the closest painting, the one where the adults are destroying the child's work, and raised her hand as if she wanted to rip the canvas off the wall. For an instant, I was back in their living room, watching my father tear my sketchbook in half while my mother said, "One day you'll thank us." "Don't," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding in my ears. "Touching the art is against gallery rules." A crowd had started to form a semicircle around us. Whispers flitted through the air. She finally seemed to notice the audience. Her lips curled into a fragile smile, but her eyes remained sharp. "So, this is what you've been doing, painting our family drama for strangers. You're embarrassing us." "You embarrassed yourself," I replied quietly. "I'm just documenting it." Before she could respond, Sakani appeared at my side. "I'm sorry," he said politely but firmly, looking at my mother. "You can disagree all you want, but you can't threaten the art. Her work is one of the most powerful pieces in this gallery." The people nearby nodded. Someone muttered, "It's incredible," loud enough for my mother to hear. Her cheeks flushed a dark, angry red. She straightened her posture, trying to regain control. "Well, enjoy your little show," she sneered. "We'll see where this art takes you when you're penniless and alone." She turned on her heel and marched out, her heels clicking against the floor like a hammer. The door closed behind her with a soft thud that sounded too much like the night my father shut it in my face. After she left, something unexpected happened. A small crowd gathered around my series, whispering about the confrontation they'd just witnessed. A local blogger asked if she could feature the paintings and the story behind them. Invitations for smaller shows followed. The humiliation she tried to throw over me had slipped off and landed right back on her. I looked at the empty doorway and felt something stir inside me. Not sadness, not fear, but a cold, sharp resolve. If my parents insisted on turning my life into a battlefield, I would make sure every wound left a mark they couldn't erase from their reputation. When the applause for the night's awards began a few minutes later and I heard my name called for the most impactful series, a question echoed in my mind, louder than the clapping. When the people who are supposed to love you turn their backs, do you choose to forgive them, or do you let your success strike back? Life didn't magically get easier after the show. The small prize money barely covered a month's rent, and my parents' anger intensified in all the ways that didn't leave bruises, but left deep scars. First came the emails, long, furious paragraphs about how I was dragging the family name through the mud and using trauma as a cheap marketing trick. I blocked them. Then came calls from relatives repeating my parents' version of the story, that I'd run away, that I was mentally unstable, that I was being manipulated. An aunt even sent a voicemail saying my art was ungodly. I laughed so I wouldn't cry. The hardest blow came a few months later. I was walking back from my diner shift when a police cruiser pulled up slowly beside me. My heart skipped a beat. The officer stepped out and asked for my name. Then he said they'd received a report of a missing minor who was believed to be in danger. That minor was me. That concern was my parents trying to have me brought home in handcuffs like I was property. At the station, after what felt like hours of questioning, an officer finally slid a paper across the table for me to sign, acknowledging that I was safe, enrolled in school, working, and not under any threat. Legally, they couldn't force me back. The officer gave me a sympathetic look as I signed. "Some parents don't know when to let go," he muttered. I stepped out into the night air with my hands shaking, fury boiling under my skin. They had tried to paint me as helpless. Fine, I thought. Then I'll paint you exactly as you are. That night, I opened my journal and started writing like it was a confession to my future self. I described every manipulation, every threat, every torn canvas. I even found old photos, my father throwing away my supplies, my mother tearing up a drawing she'd found under my pillow. I felt like I needed to document it all, like it was evidence. A month later, a flyer appeared on the college bulletin board for a regional contest themed Truth and Consequences, sponsored by a major gallery. The winner would get a massive grant and a chance to show their work to serious collectors. I designed a piece that terrified even me, a massive, distorted family portrait. The parents' faces were hyper-realistic, recognizable to anyone who knew them, but they were cracked down the middle like broken porcelain. Behind them, instead of a home, loomed a courthouse, a hospital, and a house with foreclosure signs, images of the future I wished on them every time they said I'd come crawling back. The child in the painting, the me, had her back turned to the frame, walking toward a blank canvas that glowed like an exit door. I painted until my vision blurred. One afternoon, my phone lit up with my mother's name. Against my better judgment, I answered. "We heard you made a scene with the police," she started, no greeting. "Do you have any idea how that makes us look? People think we don't care about our own daughter." I laughed bitterly. "You care about how you look, not about me." There was a pause, then my father's voice, hard and cutting. "You're still our responsibility until you're 18. Come home and we'll fix this. Drop this art nonsense, enroll in real classes, and we'll pretend this phase never happened." Something inside me snapped cleanly. "No," I said quietly. "You taught me that choices have consequences. Now, it's your turn." I hung up before they could reply. I wasn't shaking with fear anymore. It was adrenaline. Looking at the half-finished painting, I knew there was no going back. I would enter the contest. I would tell the truth on that canvas, even if it shattered what was left of our relationship. The week of the regional contest felt like being in the eye of a hurricane. The venue was huge, a converted warehouse with high ceilings and white walls that made every color scream. My piece, Truth and Consequences, hung on a center wall. During the setup, I ran my fingers lightly over the dry paint, remembering the nights I'd worked until my hands went numb. I had hidden tiny details in the work, subtle references only people who knew our family would catch. My father's watch, my mother's favorite necklace, the engraved plaque from his once prosperous business, now chipped and half buried in the background. This wasn't just art. It was a testimony. The morning of the opening, I got an email from my father, a cold block of text threatening legal action for defamation. I forwarded it to my professor, who forwarded it to the organizers. A succinct reply came back. Artistic expression is protected. We stand by our artists. For the first time in my life, people with power were on my side. When the doors opened, the room flooded with critics, local news crews, and collectors. I watched from a corner. People's faces changed when they saw my work. Curiosity, discomfort, fascination. Someone whispered, "That's brutal," sounding impressed. Then I saw them. My parents walked in together, dressed for a gala rather than a trial they didn't know they were part of. My father's jaw was already tight. My mother's eyes darted nervously around until they landed on the painting. I saw the exact moment recognition hit them. Their steps faltered. My father's face went from confusion to pure fury in seconds. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. They stood there, frozen in front of a larger-than-life reflection of their worst selves. People nearby started realizing who they were. The whispers started, sharp and fast. A local journalist raised his eyebrows, looking between the canvas and my parents. My father turned, searching the crowd, and found me. Our gazes locked. "Take it down," he hissed when he reached me. I looked back at him, unwavering. "No. This is slander." "It's a painting," I said calmly. "But if you want to talk about the actual events behind it, I have a journal full of dates, details, and witnesses. We can take that to court if you'd like. Truth and Consequences. Remember?" His mouth opened, then closed. For once, he had no answer. My mother hovered behind him, her eyes glassy with panic. "Inaya, please," she whispered. "Things are already going bad. The business is struggling. People stopped trusting your father after those rumors at work, after the police incident. This will ruin us." The words hit me, but not the way she intended. All those years they told me I'd fail without them, and now my art had the power to ruin them. I felt both powerful and strangely sad. "You did this to yourselves," I said quietly. "I just painted what happened." The judges called for everyone's attention. My heart hammered against my ribs. When they announced the grand prize winner, I heard my name. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Then the applause crashed over me. I walked to the front, my legs heavy, as I accepted the certificate and the grant check. Camera flashes went off. Someone asked me to say a few words. I stepped to the mic, my fingers gripping the podium. My parents were at the back of the room, looking small and tense under their own cracked faces. "This piece is about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones who break you," I said, my voice steady. "Sometimes the only way to survive is to tell the truth so loud it drowns out their lies." Silence fell. I took a deep breath. To everyone who was told their dreams were just a phase or a disappointment, this is for you. The applause this time felt thunderous. I stepped off the stage, and for the first time, I didn't look for my parents' reaction. I didn't need it. That day, a local news segment aired a story about the teen artist whose parents tried to silence her. Clients quietly stopped calling my father. My mother withdrew even further at work. Their world began to crumble under the weight of the consequences they had tried so hard to avoid. 11 years later, I was 27. My phone lit up on my studio table. 99 missed calls from the same number. The number I had silenced, then blocked, then unblocked, just so I could see it and choose not to answer. The landline from my parents' house. The words from that night when I was 16 echoed in my head. "You'll come crawling back in a month." I looked up at the wall in front of me, where a much newer painting hung. It was part of a series that had toured 3 countries. It showed a phone exploding with light, 99 missed calls, glowing on the screen. In the reflection of the glass, you could just make out a pair of aging, desperate faces. Behind the phone, the silhouette of a woman stood by an open window, looking at a city instead of the ringing device. That woman was me. My career had taken off after that first grant. I taught workshops, sold prints, and signed with a gallery that understood I didn't just paint pretty pictures. I painted survival. Meanwhile, my parents' lives had followed the path I'd imagined in that brutal portrait years ago. The whispers had become public. A series of bad investments and the loss of their reputation had pushed them to the edge. The house I grew up in was sold to cover debts. They had moved to a cramped apartment far from the manicured neighborhood they once boasted about. I knew these details not because I looked for them, but because the internet never forgets, and our old community loved to gossip. The first time my mother called after years of silence, I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was thinner, worn down. "Inaya, we aren't doing well. Your father's health. We could really use your help. Just call me back, please." I didn't. Instead, I went to my studio and painted, channeling that complicated knot of pity and rage into color. It wasn't simple hate anymore. It was heavier. Now, on this ordinary Tuesday, the screen was screaming. 99 missed calls. I felt my chest tighten, not out of fear, but because of the weight of what it meant to answer, or not. I let it ring one more time. Then, finally, for the first time in a decade, I picked up. Silence crackled on the line for 2 seconds. Then my mother's voice, raw and hoarse. "Inaya?" I could hear background noise, hospital monitors, distant announcements. "We've been trying to reach you." "I noticed," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "What do you want?" There was a pause. Then my father's voice, weaker than I'd ever heard it. We need help. The medical bills, the debt. We're losing everything." A bitter laugh rose in my throat before I could stop it. I lost everything at 16. "We were wrong," he said. The words came out hard, like they hurt to say. "About your art, about the way we treated you. I know it's too late to ask, but please, we're begging you." The word begging hung in the air, heavy with irony. They once told me I'd be the one begging. Now they were on their knees, even if I couldn't see them. For a few seconds, I didn't speak. My mind played back images, the door slamming, the police station, the shredded letter, the way they tried to buy my silence. Then I saw other images, my first solo show, a message from a fan saying my work gave them the courage to leave an abusive home. The kid who came to my book signing with paint-stained hands and said, "My parents hate my art too, but I'm not giving up." I walked to the window, looking out at the city that had become my true home. "Here's the thing," I said slowly. "I built this life without you. Every canvas, every check, every sleepless night, you weren't there. You were the reason I had to fight so hard in the first place." My mother's voice trembled. "We know. And we're sorry, truly. Can we at least see you, talk, try to make things right?" My eyes stung, but I refused to let the tears fall. "You want forgiveness now that you've lost everything?" I murmured. "Would you have called if you were still in that big house with your perfect reputation and your perfect lie?" The silence answered me louder than words. I already knew the truth. I could have hung up, left them to drown in the consequences they had thrown at me. A part of me wanted to. That part remembered every cruel sentence, word for word. But a smaller, more insistent part whispered that carrying this hate forever would tie me to them just as tightly as obedience ever had. I took a deep breath. "I am not your safety net," I said. "I won't be your bank. I won't erase what you did." Her breath hitched, but I continued, surprising even myself. "But I also won't be the person who watches you die out of a matter of principle. I'll have my lawyer contact the hospital for a payment plan. It will be handled through a foundation, not in my name. You don't get my forgiveness just because you're afraid. That has to be earned slowly, over time, and you might never get it all, but you won't be homeless because of me." My father started to speak, but I cut him off. "This isn't a reconciliation. This is me choosing not to become as cruel as you were. That's all." There was a muffled sob on the other end. My mother, I think. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Inaya." I ended the call before they could say anything else. My hands were shaking as I put the phone down, but there was a strange lightness in my chest, like a window had been cracked open in a room that had been sealed shut for too long. I went back to the painting of the glowing phone and the woman by the window, and I picked up a brush. In the reflection of the glass screen, I added a tiny new detail: the faint outline of a door in the distance, neither wide open nor completely shut. A possibility, not a promise. Because this was the truth. I hadn't come back begging in a month. Instead, 11 years later, they were the ones begging me to answer. And I did, but on my own terms.